Who would have thought that being alone would cut this deep? Another evening, scrolling through perfectly curated social media feeds while feeling paradoxically more disconnected than ever. In this age of unprecedented connectivity, why does loneliness feel more pervasive than ever before? The question echoes in your mind as you recognize a truth that philosophers and psychologists have long grappled with. Human beings are inherently social creatures, yet modern life seems to be pulling us further apart. Loneliness isn't just a fleeting emotion, it's a complex psychological and philosophical state that has shaped human experience throughout history. From Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, wandering through London's crowded streets feeling utterly alone, to the millions of people who found themselves isolated during recent global events, loneliness touches us all in uniquely personal ways. But what exactly happens when loneliness becomes your constant companion? How does it reshape your thoughts, your body, and your very perception of the world around you? The answers lie at the intersection of neuroscience, philosophy, and human experience, a crossroads where you might find yourself more often than you'd care to admit. When loneliness seeps in, it doesn't just affect your mood, it literally rewires your neural pathways. As you navigate through your day feeling disconnected, your brain enters a state of hypervigilance, much like your ancient ancestors who needed to stay alert for survival when separated from their tribe. This heightened state of awareness might feel familiar to you. You begin to notice every social interaction with microscopic detail, the slight pause before someone responds to your comment, the way a colleague seems to turn away during conversation, the unanswered text message that grows heavier with each passing hour. Your brain, trying to protect you, begins to interpret these normal social variations as potential threats. Research from the University of Chicago has shown that your lonely brain processes social information differently. When you're experiencing chronic loneliness, your amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, becomes more active in response to negative social cues. It's as if your brain has turned up the volume on every potential social rejection, while simultaneously muting the signals of acceptance and connection. Consider Sarah, a 34-year-old writer who moved to a new city just before the pandemic. I started noticing how my thoughts would spiral after the smallest social interactions, she explains. A cashier's neutral expression would convince me they found me offensive. I'd replay brief conversations with neighbors for hours, analyzing every word. What Sarah experienced wasn't paranoia. It was her brain's loneliness response in action. You might recognize this pattern in your own life. Perhaps you've caught yourself overthinking a simple, okay text response, or feeling inexplicably anxious about joining a group conversation. Your brain, bathed in stress hormones like cortisol, is actually changing its structure and function in response to perceived social isolation. The phenomenon extends beyond mere perception. Studies using fMRI scans have revealed that social rejection activates many of the same brain regions as physical pain. When someone says loneliness hurts, they're not speaking metaphorically. Your brain processes social isolation as a genuine threat to your survival, triggering similar neural pathways to those activated when you experience physical injury. Think of the last time you felt genuinely connected to others. Your brain likely released oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, along with dopamine and serotonin, nature's feel-good chemicals. But in prolonged loneliness, this natural reward system becomes disrupted. You might find yourself withdrawing further, even as your brain craves connection, creating a self-perpetuating cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to break. The literary world has long understood this paradox. In Virginia Woolf's The Waves, The character of Rhoda embodies this neurological battle. Her intense self-consciousness and feeling of disconnection from others mirror the very neural patterns scientists now observe in lonely brains. As you read Rhoda's thoughts, "I am not here. I have no face," you might recognize the same heightened self-awareness that loneliness triggers in your own mind. But understanding these neural mechanisms serves a purpose beyond mere recognition. Just as your brain can be rewired by loneliness, it can also be rewired for connection. This neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new neural pathways, means that the effects of loneliness, however deep they may feel, are not permanent. You tap open Instagram for what feels like the 100th time today. A friend's vacation photos pop up. Their smile seems genuine. Their life appears perfect. As you double tap to like the image, a familiar heaviness settles in your chest. Welcome to the modern paradox. Feeling lonely in a world where you're theoretically connected to hundreds, if not thousands, of people at any given moment. The numbers tell a striking story. On average, you probably spend about 2.5 hours each day scrolling through social media platforms. That's nearly 38 full days a year, spent looking at carefully curated snapshots of other people's lives. Yet studies consistently show that the more time you spend on these platforms, the more likely you are to experience profound loneliness. It's as if you're standing in a crowded room where everyone is talking, but all conversations are happening behind one-way mirrors. During his freshman year, college student Alex meticulously tracked his social media use. "I had 847 friends on Facebook, was part of dozens of group chats, and never missed a single social update," he recalls. "But every night, I'd lie in my dorm room feeling like I was the only person awake in the world." Alex's story mirrors what psychologists call social snacking, consuming bits and pieces of social connection that never quite satisfy your hunger for genuine interaction. The mechanism behind this phenomenon becomes clearer when you examine your own behavior. Think about the last time you posted something online. Perhaps it was a photo of your morning coffee, carefully angled to catch the light, or a witty comment on a friend's status. In that moment, you performed what sociologists call digital impression management, presenting a carefully curated version of yourself to the world. Now multiply that by every person in your feed, and you begin to understand why social media often feels like watching a play, where everyone, including yourself, is both actor and audience. Literature, with its prescient understanding of human nature, predicted this dynamic long before the advent of social media. In Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, people are constantly surrounded by interactive walls that broadcast artificial relationships and hollow entertainment. Sound familiar? Your Twitter feed might not be quite as dystopian, but the parallel is striking. Constant connection without genuine communion. The algorithms governing your social media experience compound this effect. They're designed to keep you engaged, not fulfilled. Each notification, each like, each comment triggers a small dopamine release in your brain, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction. You find yourself checking your phone compulsively, not because you're finding a meaningful connection, but because you're caught in what psychologists call a variable reward schedule, the same principle that makes slot machines so addictive. But perhaps most insidious is how social media has redefined your expectations of friendship and connection. When you can see that someone has read your message but hasn't responded, when you notice you weren't invited to a gathering, documented in real time on Instagram, when you watch your post sit there without engagement, these moments create new forms of social pain that didn't exist just a generation ago. It's what sociologist Sherry Turkle calls being alone together. physically isolated while drowning in a sea of superficial digital connections. The irony doesn't escape you. Platforms designed to bring people together may be driving them further apart. Each carefully filtered photo, each crafted status update, each highlight reel of someone else's life creates a kind of social comparison that breeds loneliness. You're not just comparing your life to your neighbors anymore. You're comparing it to the curated lives of hundreds of people, all showing their best moments, their biggest achievements, their perfectly imperfect morning coffee shots. As you grapple with your own experiences of loneliness, you might find comfort, or perhaps deeper questions, in knowing that philosophers throughout history have wrestled with this very same condition. But they draw an important distinction that you might recognize in your own life: the difference between existential solitude and the modern experience of loneliness. Consider for a moment the last time you felt truly alone. Was it when you were physically isolated, or paradoxically in a crowded room? The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre would argue that this fundamental aloneness is not just a temporary state, but a core condition of human existence. We are born alone, we die alone, he famously observed. Yet Sartre's perspective isn't merely depressing. It's an invitation to understand your solitude as something fundamentally different from loneliness. Take the case of Maria, a painter who spent 6 months in a remote cabin working on her art. The silence was deafening at first, she recalls, but gradually I began to distinguish between being alone and being lonely. In my solitude, I found a kind of communion with myself that I'd never experienced in the city. Maria's experience echoes what German philosopher Martin Heidegger called authentic existence, a state where you confront your fundamental aloneness, and in doing so, discover a deeper understanding of yourself. But your experience of loneliness in the modern world is likely quite different from this philosophical solitude. You might find yourself surrounded by people, connected to countless others through technology, yet feeling profoundly disconnected. Hannah Arendt, writing about the rise of mass society, predicted this phenomenon. She argued that modern loneliness isn't about physical isolation. It's about feeling superfluous, feeling that you don't truly belong anywhere in the world. Think about how this manifests in your daily life. You might have hundreds of connections on LinkedIn, dozens of people you could text right now, and yet feel a profound sense of disconnection. This is what contemporary philosopher Zygmunt Bauman calls liquid modernity, a world where connections are abundant, but commitment and depth are rare. Your relationships, like your social media feeds, can become fluid and superficial, leaving you paradoxically more isolated than ever. The philosophical tradition also offers insights into why loneliness feels so painful. Martin Buber's concept of I-though relationships suggests that genuine human connection, what he calls dialogue, is essential to fully realizing your humanity. When you're caught in chronic loneliness, you're experiencing what Buber would call an I-it world, where other people and even yourself become objects rather than subjects of genuine encounter. Albert Camus' The Stranger illustrates this social disconnect through its protagonist, Meursault, who experiences profound alienation, not from physical isolation, but from his inability or unwillingness to engage in the kind of meaningful dialogue that Buber describes. You might recognize moments in your own life where, like Meursault, you've gone through the motions of social interaction while feeling fundamentally apart from others. The existentialists would argue that recognizing your fundamental aloneness is actually the first step toward authentic connection. When you accept that no one can truly know your complete experience, that there will always be a gap between your consciousness and another's, you paradoxically become more capable of genuine relationships. It's like the difference between viewing your solitude as a prison and seeing it as a starting point for meaningful connection. This philosophical perspective offers a radical reframing of your loneliness. Perhaps what you're experiencing isn't just a personal failure of connection, but rather a symptom of broader social conditions. Contemporary philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues that modern society's emphasis on achievement, productivity, and digital connection has created a new kind of loneliness, one where you're too busy performing yourself to engage in genuine encounters with others. Your body has a story to tell about loneliness, and it speaks in a language of physical symptoms that you might not immediately connect to your emotional state. That tension in your shoulders, the unexplained headaches, the restless nights. These aren't just random physical complaints. They're your body's way of translating the experience of social isolation into tangible sensations. When cancer claimed his wife, 45-year-old accountant James confronted a battle beyond emotional grief. I braced myself for the emotional devastation, he shares, but the physical toll of loneliness caught me off guard. My blood pressure skyrocketed, my immune system crumbled, and I watched myself age a decade in mere months. His experience mirrors Rice University researchers' findings that chronic loneliness unleashes a systemic stress response throughout the body. Your immune system takes one of the hardest hits. When you're lonely, your body produces more inflammation-promoting molecules called cytokines, while simultaneously reducing the production of virus-fighting antibodies. It's as if loneliness creates tiny cracks in your immune system's armor, making you more susceptible to everything from the common cold to more serious illnesses. This isn't just theory. Studies have shown that lonely people are more likely to develop autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, and even certain types of cancer. The impact on your sleep is equally profound. You might notice that even when you're exhausted, your mind refuses to quiet down. This mirrors findings from the University of Chicago, where researchers discovered that lonely individuals experience more sleep fragmentation, those mysterious moments when you wake up briefly without remembering it the next day. Your body, hypervigilant from perceived social threat, never fully relaxes into the deep, restorative sleep you need. The connection between loneliness and physical health appears in literature as well. In Charlotte Bronte's Villette, the protagonist Lucy Snow's isolation manifests in fever, insomnia, and near-physical collapse. While Bronte wrote this in the 19th century, modern medicine validates her intuitive understanding of how loneliness can literally make you sick. Your cardiovascular system tells its own story of loneliness. Each time you feel socially isolated, your heart responds as if you're in physical danger. Your blood pressure rises, your heart rate increases, and stress hormones flood your system. Over time, this can lead to what cardiologists call broken heart syndrome, a very real condition where emotional distress can cause symptoms that mimic a heart attack. Even your digestive system reacts to loneliness. You might notice changes in your appetite, either eating more for comfort or losing interest in food entirely. The gut-brain connection means that chronic loneliness can disrupt your microbiome, leading to digestive issues that seem unrelated to your emotional state. That uncomfortable churning in your stomach during social situations isn't just nervousness. It's your body's stress response system in action. Research from Brigham Young University suggests that severe loneliness is as damaging to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This startling comparison helps explain why your body reacts so strongly to social isolation. From an evolutionary perspective, being separated from your social group was once a matter of life and death, and your body still responds as if that were true. But perhaps most concerning is how loneliness can accelerate aging at a cellular level. Scientists have observed that lonely people show shorter telomeres, the protective caps on your chromosomes that indicate cellular age. This means that persistent loneliness isn't just making you feel older, it's actually speeding up your body's aging process at a molecular level, breaking the cycle, finding your way back to connection. As you've journeyed through the landscape of loneliness, from its neural pathways to its philosophical depths, from its digital manifestations to its physical symptoms, you might be wondering, where do you go from here? The weight of disconnection may feel heavy, but within that very awareness lies the seed of transformation. Remember that evolutionary psychologist you learned about earlier. They would tell you that your capacity for loneliness exists because your ancestors needed strong social bonds to survive. This means that feeling lonely isn't a character flaw or a personal failure. It's your body and mind working exactly as they should, signaling that it's time to reconnect. Like hunger prompts you to eat, loneliness prompts you to seek meaningful connection. After months of working remotely during the global pandemic, David found himself slipping into deep isolation. I started treating connection like physical exercise, he explains. I made it non-negotiable, even when it felt uncomfortable. Small interactions at first, a real phone call instead of a text, a walking meeting with a colleague, joining a local book club. It felt artificial at first, but gradually it became natural. David's approach mirrors what neuroscientists now understand about brain plasticity. Your neural pathways can be rewired through consistent, intentional action. The key lies in understanding that authentic connection doesn't require grand gestures. Think of it as similar to tending a garden. It's the small, regular acts of nurturing that yield the most beautiful results. This might mean replacing one social media scrolling session with a 10-minute phone call to a friend, or taking your laptop to a local cafe, where even the ambient presence of others can help satisfy your brain's need for social contact. The philosophers you encountered earlier would encourage you to embrace periods of solitude while building meaningful connections. As Rilke wrote in Letters to a Young Poet, learning to be comfortable with your own company is not the opposite of connection. It's often the foundation for deeper relationships with others. When you're at peace with your fundamental aloneness, you're free to choose connection rather than desperately seeking it to fill a void. Your body, too, will respond to these efforts at reconnection. Each genuine interaction, however small, triggers the release of oxytocin and other neurochemicals that combat the physical effects of loneliness. Like a plant turning toward the sun, your body naturally responds to authentic human connection with improved immune function, better sleep, and reduced stress responses. As you move forward, remember that technology isn't inherently isolating. It's how you use it that matters. Instead of passively consuming others' highlight reels, you might use digital tools to facilitate real-world connections. Join a local hiking group through Meetup, or use social media to organize face-to-face gatherings rather than replace them. The journey from loneliness to connection isn't linear. There will be days when the gap between yourself and others feels vast, when the effort seems too great. But like the protagonist in Murakami's Norwegian Wood discovers, the path out of isolation often begins with a single, genuine connection. Even if that connection is first with yourself, you're not alone in your loneliness. This paradox holds a profound truth. The very universality of this experience connects you to countless others who understand exactly what you're feeling. As you take small steps toward connection, remember that somewhere, someone else is taking those same steps. reaching out across their own gap of isolation, creating bridges one interaction at a time.